So I said this before, but now I'm going to say it for posterity, that I see what I do in my ministry as a body of work that I am conscious of what I do now and that it would be available later, and feel that it is important to cover some of the main or finer points of Christian philosophy, doctrine, discussion, curiosity, controversy. I'll move controversy to the top of the list because I love that. Because I know there are people that currently and will subsequently really take the time and go through all these videos on the internet and really watch them so they can say they did that. I'm one of those people, like, if I get hooked on something, I will watch every last bit of it, like Law and Order Special Victims Unit. I've seen every episode. Bozo. Every episode. Bozo. I believe that you could say Bozo now, and there's people that have never heard of Bozo the Clown. They're not waking up screaming in the middle of the night either, are they? So, that having been said, tonight I want to talk about a whole list that's written on my hand of uncomfortable subjects. I don't know if you noticed, but the other night when, and you could look it up if you see this on the internet on the sermon called I'm Gay, how many other topics I managed to quickly say what the Bible said or didn't say on the subject. I covered a lot of ground. And I plan to do that tonight, hopefully, in a reasonable period of time. Hopefully. Saul is at the end of his life. He's in battle with the Philistines. His sons have all been killed. He's injured. He is going to die. He is surrounded. And he asks the soldier in his right hand, to kill him. And the soldier won't kill him. He says, I won't kill you. You're king. You're my king. I won't kill you. And Saul goes, fine. And he takes his sword and he falls on it himself. And he kills himself. So in the course of a second of Scripture, we have euthanasia and suicide brought up. If Saul's about to die anyways in battle, is it okay for someone on his team to kill him as an act of honor? Or is he doing something wrong before God by asking that? And when the guy doesn't do it, if he's going to die anyways, did he do something wrong by falling on his sword? But then the next paragraph of Scripture gets really weird because it said, because Saul was not obedient, because Saul went after David, because Saul compromised his kingship, because Saul went to a medium, the Lord killed him. Interesting. Because now, in the matter of a paragraph, we have, he was going to die anyways. He wanted someone on his team to kill him. He killed himself, but it was the Lord who killed him because he had done all these bad things. Very complicated set of circumstances and outcomes and, how do I say this, notions to put in the heads of future Christians. I'm about to toss a very big salad, and I'm trying to decide what's actually the lettuce here. Like, what am I going to put in the bowl first, and then how I'm going to add stuff to it. So I think I want to tell a story. Sometimes when you tell a story, everything else seems to make sense. The story you're about to hear is true. The names have been changed to protect the innocent. Not. So why tell a story if you're going to change the names? Isn't it more fun that you say the names? Let's just say this. I had a very close friend who was a tremendous help in this ministry. He was Jesus to me in this ministry, and he was married, and he had children. And the entire time that I knew him, his wife was a nutcase. And he cried to me every day we were together about something else she did that was destructive to that family. Like, take all their money and buy stuff they don't need when the money needed to go to their rent. You know, or pick fights with him, or she would call him and pick fights with him, or she would come in and pick fights with him. And I saw with my own eyes a very, very maladjusted, out of control woman. It was no surprise that she also had maladjusted, out of control children. That their children, they weren't horrible, but they were a handful. And he would set up, he was a minister, he would set up counseling sessions, he would set up recording sessions with me, and set up times where you need, where you need there to be order, not chaos, where you need to have control over the environment. And she would show up and drop off the out-of-control children, very, very young children, and then go off and run up the credit card. And he lived in a world of choosing his battles wisely. And I watched him try to be nice, try to be a Christian example, sometimes succeed, exude more patience than the situation warranted. And I watched him snap. I watched him snap at her. I watched him snap at the kids. And I can say from every single thing that I saw that he did not cross any line that I, as a parent and as a husband, did not cross. That's all I can say. Anything he's guilty of that I saw, I'm guilty of. But one day he came to me and said that she had left the state with his children and had sued for custody and made allegations of abuse. This thing escalated to such a degree where I watched this woman purposely go into situations to make it where he could not get any of the help he needed. Go to their pastor and say all kinds of things, so he had no one to turn to there. Go to a, what is the term for free legal aid, if you can't afford it. Go get free legal aid when she had taken all their money. But go get free legal aid and literally go in, sign all the paperwork, walk in, sit down for a meeting for 5 minutes, shake someone's hand and leave, and have no need for free legal aid for the sole purpose because she found out that in the state they were in, only one of them could take advantage of free legal aid in the event of a divorce. Made it where he had no counsel. Then he went to his employers, because he had two different jobs, and make allegations to them in a manner which, even if they weren't true, they would have to act to err on the side of caution. I watched her go out of her way to make it where he had no livelihood, that he had no support, that he had no friends, that he had no family. He lost their home. He lost his car. I watched her strategically do these things. I watched how she did this, and then made it impossible for him to get to her, to even see the kids, to even have a chance to try to figure out how to rectify the situation. And the last time I saw him, he met with me and said, I'm leaving and you're probably never going to see me again, because I'm going across country to fight for my children. And at the very least, I'm going to have to live in the state they're in and establish residency to get some kind of compassion from a judge, to have at least visitation. But he had no money, he had no job, he had no transportation. And the only thing he could afford in the time frame of what he was looking at was a motorcycle. And the only place he could afford to live when he got there was someone let him live in their trailer that had no running water, no electricity. And shortly thereafter, he got killed on that motorcycle. And when they went into his trailer to gather his belongings, they saw that he had been fishing through trash cans for food. And when they did an autopsy, when he was treated after his death, they said he suffered from malnutrition, that he had skin disease, that he had internal disease that came from starvation and exposure. Now, this was someone who was a recognized member of the community, who did more for me, not just in my ministry, but in Christianity put together. In the course of a year, went from that to someone that was completely lost, completely malnourished, completely out of their head, completely in devastation, and lost everything because one person waited long enough till they got all their ducks in a row to purposely do this to him. And when she called me on her own and asked me to give money towards his burial, I said, "You murdered him. You murdered him." And she goes, "Well, I knew you were going to say that, but you need to..." No, lady, you murdered him. You are responsible. She goes, "Well, you don't know anything. You don't know what really went down." I said, "I know that you knew me, and you could have come to me and said, your best friend's out of control, and this is happening, and this is happening. And as a man of God, I would have had to take steps. But you purposely went to the people you went to cause the damage that you caused, but you purposely avoided the people that could have reached him if there really was a problem." I said, "You killed him. You killed him. It's on your head. You murdered him." And when I talk about him, I say, I have that year, a friend of mine was murdered. Because that's what happened. I watched it happen. I watched it with my own eyes. And she said to me, "I don't know why the Lord decided to take him at this time." And used that phrase, "the Lord took him." And I said, and I'm paraphrasing because you guys all know how I was talking at this point. I said, "Listen, you are so lucky you're clear across the country right now. To have you say, Jesus took him after all you did." I don't even know what the phrase means. I've never known what the phrase means when people say it. I mean, I know what they mean when they say the Lord took him. The Lord took him on this day. I don't know what that means. Does Jesus go around and pluck people off the earth? It's a complicated theological issue. But again, Saul would have been killed in battle. Saul wanted to be killed by a soldier. Saul ended up killing himself but the account states that the Lord killed him. This man died in a motorcycle accident. And I call it murder. And she calls it his time. All death is because of sin. Everything that dies, dies because of sin. Period. Everything that dies is because of sin. And if sin hadn't happened, I have no idea how we were being sustained prior to the fall. But since we didn't kill and eat animals, and because there was vegetation, we ate stuff of some sort. But there doesn't seem to be any indication that we even needed to eat. Because we were in the presence of God, and He was life-sustaining in His own very existence. So it is quite possible, believe it or not, that the only time Adam and Eve ate prior to the fall was at the time of the fall, when they ate whatever that fruit was. That even though God told them not to eat the fruit, it doesn't mean they were eating fruit prior. It doesn't exactly mean that. And again, we are not hearing every conversation they had with God. We're only hearing the conversations that pertain to what we need to know. So it is quite possible there had been another conversation, because you see this throughout the Old Testament and you see it throughout the New Testament, that a subject comes up more than once, where God said, there are things that you're going to look at and they're going to trigger a response of, that might be fun to eat. And Eve could have said, what is eating? Oh, it's putting it in your mouth and chewing it and trying to get it into your body somehow. But you don't really need to do that because you have meat. But again, He put them in an environment of choice. I'm stretching here, I understand. But there's no evidence of them eating. You look at all the accounts in the Bible of events of God, and immediately people are eating. Lazarus was raised from the dead, and they gave him a sandwich. You know, Adam and Eve were created, and there's no wedding feast. No wedding feast. Think about it. There's no evidence of them eating until they eat the fruit that they weren't supposed to eat. But God did say, you can eat everything in the garden except this. But there's no evidence that they did. There's no evidence that they needed to because they were hungry. There's no evidence that they hungered or thirst for anything. Period. There's no evidence. You cannot say they did. The only thing you can say is that they did not eat creatures that had eyes. That's a fact. They did not. They did not do that. The only thing that they would have eaten, if they ate, was something plant-based. And if they ate it, they may have just eaten it because it's pleasurable. Because it's nice to have something. But there's no evidence that they needed to eat. There's no evidence that they needed to eat. So every single aspect of death comes from the fall of man, comes from sin. Comes from sin. Now, what about plant death? I mean, if you eat a carrot, don't you kill the carrot? I'm not a botanist or a horticulturist, but I think that there are a lot of things that you can eat the fruit of without killing the plant. I think so. I think you can eat an apple. And I'm trying to be silly here, but I understand the argument would say, well, aren't you killing the apple? Isn't the apple alive? Isn't the apple alive when it's part of the tree? Yeah, well, my hair is alive when it's part of my head. I know I picked a bad example because hair is dead, right? Theoretically, isn't the apple dead too? Once you see an apple, if it doesn't get eaten, what's going to happen to the apple? It's going to fall off anyways. Once you see the apple, once you see the fingernails, once you see the hair, I'm not making an argument. I'm speculating on the possibility, but it is a fact. There's no question. We did not consume dead animals or fish or chicken or anything that had eyes before the fall. Period. Never happened. There's no evidence that we needed to eat anything to sustain our lives prior to the fall. Never. Now, that having been said, Katie Lang, the singer Katie Lang, is a devout vegan, and she's also a Buddhist, which means she's a double devout vegan. And I saw an interview with her, and she talked about, they asked her about her veganism, and she said, you know, we kill all the time. We kill all the time. Even if you're a vegan, you kill all the time. I mean, you know, she didn't mention this, but the first thing that came to mind is anyone who's planted anything knows that in the harvesting of vegetables and fruit, you're killing all kinds of little bugs. You know, there's all kinds of stuff that you're unsettling at that point. That it's impossible in this life to not accidentally kill something. It's impossible. And there's people who, on one extreme, like to go out of their way to kill bugs. They're just like, they'll go on a bug hunt. Then there's people like me that won't kill a bug unless they really have to. Then there's other people that won't kill a bug even if they have to, not because they're scared, but because they think they're sacred. You know, there's all kinds of people, but the fact is, somehow, some way, nothing died before the fall. So if you accidentally stepped on a ladybug, it wouldn't get squished. It would go, hey, get off of me, man. You know, the ladybug would let you know, oh, I'm sorry. No, you will not. You do that all the time. Big bully. You know, who knows? Who knows? All I know is a serpent walked up to Eve and offered her a piece of fruit, and she didn't run away screaming. So it must have been really different back then. Now, the reason I'm saying all this is we have to understand that all of the above are the product of sin. All of the above. Everything I'm going to discuss tonight is the product of sin. Original sin. Not, let's invent new sin, but the original sin set off a world where suicide, murder, euthanasia, abortion would make sense in certain circles. Because we would not have war. We would not have war if it weren't for the fall. There was nothing to war against before the fall. And murder is like a mini war between two people. That someone gets in their head, it makes sense to me that you're the enemy and I need to put a stop to you somehow. And abortion is another form of murder. That's what Christians like to say, I think. It's another form of murder. But we have exceptions to the rule, don't we? And if someone's in the room and they've had an abortion and I call it murder, there's about 50 New Testament scriptures that say you might want to rephrase that if you want to reach that person for Jesus. You don't want to change the truth, but we are dealing with, I'm going to say, euthanasia is murder. There's a law for it. It's called murder. It's called murder. But there's no law for abortion, which is also a form of euthanasia. Boy, people are going to love when I explain that one. But these are very tricky concerns. Suicide is another form of euthanasia and another form of abortion, just stretching terms a little bit. There was an amazing play called Night Mother about a woman who calls her mom, has her mom come over and says, I'm going to kill myself today. And I want to talk to you about things, and then there's things we have to put in order. And it's, a 2-hour play where you're waiting to see if it's really going to happen at the end of the play. They made an amazing movie of it with Sissy Spacek playing the girl and Anne Bancroft playing her mom, and I can't recommend a movie more. If you really, really, really want to examine the concept of suicide in a very adult arena, without a whole lot of emotionalism, without a whole lot of spiritualism, but just really listening to the case for it and against it. It was a really fascinating piece of work. But there's one part in Night Mother where the daughter says to the mother says to the daughter, you're going to go to hell. Suicide's a sin, you're going to go to hell. And the daughter says, that's not true, mother. And besides, Jesus was a suicide. And the mother's like, oh my God, blasphemy, blasphemy. I can't believe you said that. Oh my gosh, now you really will go to hell. But Jesus was a suicide. If the term suicide means being personally responsible for your own death at your own hand, Jesus was a suicide, because Jesus could not be killed. Jesus took his own life. But Jesus also put himself in a situation that would get him killed. We call situations like that now death by cop. It's a form of suicide, where you purposely antagonize a cop and wave a gun so they shoot you. It's suicide. You know what I'm saying? It is suicide when it's by your own hand, even if you get someone else to do it. It's suicide. Euthanasia and suicide obviously run hand in hand. That's why abortion is euthanasia and murder running hand in hand, because abortion is a solution someone came up with for a terminal problem they didn't think they could handle for whatever reason. But because it's a violation of someone else's rights, even if they are just the size of a rice pellet, it is murder. Now, I'm not putting the emphasis on murder like you go to jail or go to hell. I'm just being honest. It's death at someone else's hand. And anyone who's been a parent, there's no argument about when life starts. There's no argument. Life starts in your heart. Life starts with the apple in your eye. You know what I'm saying? There is no, arguing the point of conception, the moment of conception, is a given to a parent. Especially anyone who has conceived and had a miscarriage. You know exactly what you lost. So there's no question in a parent's mind. And there's no question in the mind of women who've had abortions. It's really hard to find any that haven't suffered from it. I want to say you can't find any that haven't suffered from having had an abortion. You can't. But I'm sure someone will come forth and say, well, I'm fine with it. I slept just fine. I've known countless women from different walks of life. And there's so many stories. There's so many stories. And life is a long time. When you make a decision in your youth, your life is a long time. One day there's time to think about it. I have a tattoo, and every once in a while I do kind of go, I wonder why I did that. I wouldn't do that now. You know what I mean? That little tinge of regret. Pretty hard to find anyone that's aborted a child that doesn't feel that at least one time in their life. And the same thing with euthanasia. I know people who have worked with the hemlock